Hello and welcome back to the show. For the next couple of months, I will be using this platform to allow viewers to get to know and interact with our 2020 Democratic political candidate, as well as discuss some social issues. In order for us to make the change that we want to see in this world, we have to be educated and politically active. On the Hagir show, we are trying to do our part to raise awareness, and today we have Sarah Hammond with us, who is running for a House representative in the 11th district. And without further ado, I will have Sarah introduce herself and tell us who she is. Hello, Sarah, and welcome to the show.
Hi, I first and foremost want to say thank you for taking or rather affording me the opportunity to really speak with you this afternoon and just engage and get to learn a little bit about each other and kind of where our platforms stand, and especially why voting is so important this year. So first and foremost, my name is Sarah Hammond. I'm running for Congress here because I believe wholeheartedly that Lancaster and New York counties deserve better. And I believe that, the United States as a whole right now really deserve better as well. So I'm originally from Hanover, Pennsylvania, as far over on the York County end of our district as you can get in Pennsylvania's 11th Congressional District. So as a small town woman with blue collar roots, I really, really have experienced the negative impact that partisan gridlock has created in Washington for working class families like yours and mine. Yeah. Far too long, our Congressman Lloyd Smucker in particular, but this also extends to Congress people, all throughout the states here, have just been continually brushing off of our concerns, really brushing off the thoughts and really the needs of people in this district. And that's proven to still be happening very hard here with everything going on with COVID, right? So our economy wasn't working for almost 44% of our people nationwide prior to leading into 2020. And we know that especially now, again, with COVID, we're really feeling that financial burden right here at home in Pennsylvania, here in Southern York County, here in Lancaster County. And that is one of the main reasons why my team and I are standing up to give a voice to those whose daily lives, just like ours, are teetering on the edge of financial stability. So we've been dedicated a lot the last better part of the year now to researching and supporting solutions for a lot of these issues causing economic hardship here in our communities, and making sure that we're doing the best that we can to ensure that more of our families can prosper. So I really believe in what we can do as individuals here. We've seen it, with plenty of great candidates on your show, especially strong female candidates across Pennsylvania. We're seeing it really across the nation as well. I think we need to really keep the momentum up and talk about why it's important that we're voting up and down the ballot and supporting it, because there's a lot at stake. I'm 27 years old, and this is easily the most important election of my lifetime, just as I can imagine that it is for many people watching and tuning in with us out there too.
And this is just in a nutshell, Sarah, but we want you to dig deep and tell us exactly who you are. And it's so refreshing, someone in your age. And I've been following you. It is not just, because you're running as a Democratic candidate, but as a all-rounded human being. I've been following you addressing main issue that affect all of us, and I think it's beyond your age and your time, and it's so refreshing to see not just you but so many strong, powerful women running this year, and hopefully everybody is able to go to your website and learn a little bit about you and what you are passionate about. Can we just start talking about what makes you want it to run, and especially this year?
Yeah, so what made me decide to get involved? I think I'll have to take it back to why I really got involved and more interested in politics in the first place. And that takes me back to, honestly, one of the earliest things, the 2008 economy crash. When the housing market crashed, my father's entire industry, he was in the lumber business, he was in that industry for generations, that entire industry's survival depended in large part to the housing market and then to building, and also, growing up and realizing the ways that they were working on sustainability efforts that were both, economically and environmentally sustainable in the industry. So In 2008, I would have been around 15 years old, and I can just remember the stress and the tension of everything going on at the time and how that impacted our family. I come from, again, a very small town rural family. My mother is from in and around our district. She's from Spring Grove. My dad was from the Johnstown area on the other side of the state, but came over here, was a Teamster for a while in Philadelphia before, really settling here and having a family with my mother and tackling back into the lumber industry there. And I can remember, again, all that stress that was compounding, and to see multiple generations of my family's livelihood just swept out. And I see more, like now more than ever with COVID, that we're going to have similar instances within various industries where this is going to be the end result.
Yeah.
We're going to see it. It's both an economic, it's an economic pandemic, and it's also a global health pandemic. And I think it's time that, the vitriol, both at the state level and especially in Washington, while we're looking at both the HEROES Act, which was presented by Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats back in June, versus the HEROES Act, versus the HEALS Act, which was just let out by Mitch McConnell within the past few days. Seeing, we have this vitriol back and forth, but we need to come together to make sure that not only can our economy be picked up as we get into a safer momentum, but that we're making sure that, those who are essential workers have the right protective equipment, and that they're receiving hazard pay, and that we're making sure that, here in Lancaster City, for example, where we are per capita, I believe, we have the highest rate of immigration, asylum, and refugee resettlement per capita here in the city. We're a welcoming city, and to see Congressman Lloyd Smucker discount my friends and their families, and for there to be no resources or virtually no resources covered from bills presented from either side here right now. There are so many issues that fall together that we need to tackle. Health insurance with my personal issues. But my dad lost his health insurance, and I was getting into my high school years. I had a career field hockey ending knee injury. I tore my ACL, happened to have some complications, and did not have, the adequate health coverage because my dad had lost his job within that industry and his new coverage didn't kick in yet. And it's just that kind of crazy timing that I'm not, the only one dealing with this. As a first generation college student, where that impacted my potential scholarships and almost, my ability to attend school. That was a huge deal, and I'm not unique in those circumstances. Moving forward to being in college as a survivor of sexual assault, and again, being in a position where I was personally underinsured while my mother worked at a hospital back home, and I was on that insurance. You're getting insured through a hospital and still underinsured and can't, have access to the resources that you need to go, whether it's post-traumatic related mental health issues, whether it is, the direct aftercare for everything you need, not even getting into everything with backlog of rape kit testing and everything else with that. Like, there are just so many issues that tie into our environment, and the lack of action and just the crazy amount of platitudes without that lack of action behind them are really what have driven me to get involved. And I know a lot of other people who are just as active now too. I cried when I saw that Hillary Clinton lost. I was working second shift embroidering hats at Legacy Athletic back in Hanover, and saw the returns come in. I would work until almost 3 a.m. and on night shift. I remember watching them come in and just being devastated, and realizing that so many women in particular who I worked with there, whether they were single parents, whether they were working nights because they had to get up and then be able to take care of their children during the day before coming back into work for another 12-hour shift, 10-hour shift, depending on the day. Seeing how these things detrimentally impact each other and how they detrimentally impact women with, no guaranteed access to childcare. A big thing when we're looking at sending parents back to work prematurely without a vaccine. When we're looking and talking about schools who, schools should not be our primary source of childcare. They're there as educators. There's just a lot of things that we're running on within our platform and have been running on, and we're told we're non-starters less than 6 months ago, are now the things at the forefront of our discussion moving forward. And we're just continually trying to educate people on the policies that can directly positively impact us now, within the next 5 to 10 years, and also for generations to come.
And thank you for bringing that up, because as a single parent, I was a single parent myself, raising two girls. I know the struggle, and I know so many women out there, and men for that matter, because we can't discriminate and say, it's not, it's a lot of women and maybe a couple men, but it's still the same issue affect both genders. And, we are not looking at the whole big picture, like you said. And I read your campaign. I read your in your website. You talked about healthcare for all, and I'm sure somewhere there you are linking everything together with education, making sure that we are giving equal opportunity to kids from all
Walks of life.
yes, yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
background.
I lost
Yeah.
my train of thought here, but we're giving them a chance, because if you don't give equal opportunity, health wise, education, housing, and all of that, it ties up. We are not going to have a useful and an equal opportunity for X versus Y and Z. Like I said, I was a single mother myself, and I know exactly what are you talking about. Working, trying to cover the daycare. Sometimes the daycare doesn't even open on time for you to go to work, and if you don't
Yeah.
work, you're not going to make money. And a lot of people look at it and consider the people who are struggling are lazy. What are we going to do? What are we going to say to that when someone look at what are we facing now, and say, for example, the $600 that was given for pandemic assistance or unemployment for people who truly work and lost their job. A lot of people were upset this is happening, and I know there are some people took advantage, and that's in everywhere, not just in the United States.
And it's such a minimal amount when we talk. And this is a very loose we, and I hate that it's partisan, and as partisan as it is, but particularly looking at Republicans over the last years, making immigrants and asylum seekers scapegoats, making those who are reliant on welfare scapegoats. And this concept, I think where the disconnect really is and has become is, I come from, just as a little bit of my background, I come from Hanover, Pennsylvania, as I mentioned earlier, and we have a difficult relationship with our race relations in the past. And I mean, within my young childhood in the 90s, feeling a lot of the kickback from the race riots that were happening in New York, after everything with Rodney King, after, seeing a lot of the detrimental impact even leading up into my college days at Slippery Rock University, where I lived and I worked in our global development office with international students my entire 4.5 years there. And one of my friends from Pakistan, it broke my heart in 2012 when he came up and we were just having a conversation about how poorly he was treated coming here to America, having this concept and this idea that, here was a fresh start at a free and equitable future. And equitable, I think, is the biggest key term here. We have to have empathy, and we have to create circumstances in which both generationally, whether it's multicultural speaking, so like across all platforms, that we're making an equitable future. Because right now, my generation doesn't feel that. I can guarantee that, refugees who are coming in within the last few months here to our district alone don't have the resources. They're not counted in the HEALS or the HEALS Act, for example. They're kind of left in limbo. So we're seeing a lot of how this disproportionately impacts people, and to draw it back again to how poor race relations have been within our area. We are predominantly white outside of the city, a predominantly white, very rural and impoverished area, really. We don't have a very strong upper middle class, even at best. We're feeling that a lot here at home. A lot of people, who just had their monthly $600 benefits cut off, and are facing eviction now with all of these things running out. There's not substantial help, and we haven't seen a lot done across the board over the last 4 months that we've been really facing this hard. And that, again, extends to education, that extends to, I strongly feel, and have been promoting this for the entirety of my campaign and my involvement with politics, but that I believe strongly that healthcare should not be tied to employment.
Yeah.
We're seeing so many issues. We have almost half of our population, half of our working population out of work right now. We're seeing numbers just as bad as, if not approaching worse than we saw in the Great Depression. And a lot of these industries aren't coming back. They don't have the money to support bringing workers back on. And we need to stop putting Band-Aids. It's like we built this house in America where we started by covering basic needs with a New Deal back earlier in the mid-1900s there. And then we just kept stacking administration after administration, all these novelties on top of this house while letting the inside decay. Yeah. Now that the house is starting to fall down under the weight of everything we've added on top, we need to take the Band-Aids off and reinvest in basic human needs. Because if we don't have, access to affordable housing and access to childcare and equitable solutions within our education system, which this is more of a state issue, but is something that I still feel very strongly about, is, maybe looking at a compromise where we move funding school districts to a county-wide level. You keep the same schools you have, but the redistribution of resources that are available there and how we can tie in federal funding to that to make sure that, post-Jim Crow era zoning laws that have created a lot of systemic issues that we have and really were a way to sort of legally push segregation immediately in that area. It's a way that we can start to define what the concept of reparations look like when we're reaching for equity. It's not always just a deliberate amount of money. It's how we address our criminal justice system, our immigration system, our education system, our healthcare system, and everything that ties back into that.
And I think I never heard that described beautifully the way you did, like a decayed house, and we keep adding and building. Thank you for this visual, because I'm sure a lot of our listeners will appreciate that, to sit down and just think, yeah, she's correct, and we keep covering just the same wounds. We've been covering that and not looking inside and seeing the rotten wound that we had. And like you said, the Jim Crow, the segregation. Even, I mentioned the 13th, the documentary, so many times, and I wanted people to, whoever did not watch it yet, to go and watch it to see the systemic racism. A lot of people don't think systemic racism exists, and we keep saying this over and over. A lot of my friends don't believe there is such a thing as white privilege. And I know those issues, we did talk about those issues before, but if they don't change, and if people is still questioning this, that means we still have a lot of work to do. And we still have, like you said, to try to rebuild. So we are not supposed to be afraid of putting everything to the ground, demolish everything and start building, especially fresh eyes and thoughts and mind, like you and so many of our beautiful Democratic candidates who are running this year. So I know, everyone listening to us right now, if you never heard of Sarah, please go and look on her website, look on her page, Facebook page, or her page. There is a link there to donate, contribute, and volunteer. Learn about the issue that she's passionate about, and I'm sure she is open if you have a question or concern to contact her and give your thoughts about what can she do. The healthcare. I know you talked about not tying up unemployment to healthcare and universal healthcare. And we've seen this successfully happening in Canada and so many other countries. Why are people against it? And the ones that need it the most here, what do you think this is from, and what can we do as voters to help us get this done?
So I think there are a couple reasons why it's a monumental task, and I'm actually going to tie this back because it does really tie into the systemic racism and some of the inequalities and injustices that we're seeing, and especially how that disproportionately impacts, at least from our perspective, rural communities like we have here. And I think the same mentality, people are afraid. And they're afraid because they've been let down by their government for so long. So when they hear a term like Medicare for all, for example, or for any form of single-payer universal health care, as we're promoting, they don't realize that that doesn't necessarily have to mean that it's entirely in the government's hands, because I understand that that can be exceptionally scary when we feel that, things fluctuate so much within politics with who's coming in, with what majorities are, with everything going on. But how can we lay something concrete down? It's a scary thing to commit to when we see the kind of price tags. And especially the misinformation in today's social media and confirmation bias cycle. So we're having these discussions. First and foremost, I think it comes down to education in the same ways that it does, again, like I mentioned, for systemic racism. And I want to draw that back to Hanover as an example and relate it to Lancaster City. So my background in education, I studied what is now technically digital media, but was an overall communications degree back then. It focused in media studies, focused in rhetoric and propaganda, like studying a lot of that interaction with politics and local communities back in the time. And then I also studied French and art, which helped me to gain sort of a wider cultural view about how international relations sort of ties into all of this, how policy ties into this. But what was most important to this particular discussion is just how confirmation bias really rules within our current government and within our media cycle. And in Hanover, for example, we have the Hanover Evening Sun. We might have ABC 27 and WGAL, your typical, small town news stations and stuff. And for the large part, I moved out of Hanover, came over to Lancaster. There are a couple of us who have gone out, but largely we are an area where, if you're in Hanover, you've likely been there for generations. The expectation is you'll probably be there, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But that's just the kind of home-knit, very, close kind of community that we have there. But as times are changing, especially in the social demographic type of thing, it becomes more difficult for people outside of this area to understand that, if I am now someone who is a baby boomer and I've lived my entire life hearing the same kind of confirmation bias around because this is what my community shows. And when I think or hear of racism, in their minds, a lot of times that goes back to very public lynchings. That goes back to screaming vulgarities on the streets and being able to openly segregate. And that is what in their mind is racist in those things. They don't see the systemic factor and how George Floyd's death plays into this, how Antoine Rose and his death played into this, how, every single person that has been brought up, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, like all these different things, they only hear what is kind of spoken of word or what they kind of hear in their mind and start to get confirmation bias on with social media. And then when we start to understand that they're not seeing the same news sources and the same facts and the same perceptions, and they're not experiencing the same kind of cultural diversity in our homes at any point in their lives, it makes it a little more clear to understand where the disconnect is and why Fox News is not such a crazy jump in their minds from being factual. In Lancaster City, completely different. We have LNP, we have a lot of groups, we have, CSW and Brave with the Bhutanese refugee community, of course, and Dilly, like promoting things like this. And we have, a very strong and active LGBTQIA community, and we are able to live stream and see and show the demonstrations that are going on here and how they are peaceful unless otherwise provoked, and to sort of wage that gap. So how that ties into your original question about healthcare for me is that same kind of mentality where there's that disconnect. That's the exact same thing that is being fed into by Fox News, by a lot of just, again, the general distrust for I paid more taxes, I was supposed to get better healthcare, but now I can't, afford aging with dignity and prescription costs. I can't be a millennial or someone from Gen Z who is coming out and does not even have an option to be able to pay for healthcare, let alone any out-of-pocket premiums or deductibles that might come with that. I might be, you know, a single mother with children at home where I'm working the majority of my week, a lot of times with forced overtime, mandatory overtime in these situations, and I'm getting most of my paycheck garnished for healthcare that I need to pay up to $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever the premium deductible is if something happens before I get any help. And that's not even talking about pre-existing conditions or the fact that, again, we can't just go into a hospital and, you know, I would be less likely to go to a hospital unless I knew something was very, very wrong, even with health insurance, because of the cost deterrent of it here. And that's absolutely unacceptable where we're at here today. But what I would promote is there are a lot of ways to educate yourself about this. We've looked through probably 13 or 14 different countries over the last 8 or 9 months, just having discussions, seeing, you know, which various versions might work better than others. And though there is never going to be a perfect system, I very much think that, you know, we're leaning towards promoting a public-private mix where health insurance, or rather getting rid of insurance and just having public health care without a middleman, run by the government, and then having the option for private hospitals to be able to compete, sort of like gas stations, for example. If one gas station has gas that's $3 and you see one has it for $2.60 down the street, you're going to go to the one where there's $2.60, and then the $3 gas station is going to have to compete. That's the same concept that we want to see with private hospitals, where we can make sure that accountability does not fall entirely in the hands of the private sector nor on the public government side of things. So it kind of helps to force out that monopoly and create a little more balance.
That will be an amazing solution, because the middleman is always taken away, like it's a seesaw, you know, two-sided, taken from us, deductible, etc., etc., and taken from the government the same way. So your solution, I think, will be a very good solution. And it's not something new. I mean, for people who are listening, a lot of people don't like change, but sometimes something has to give. Like we have to look at some things happening now and say, this is not working. We need a solution. We need something different. And to just go back to what you said about small society, like I know a lot of places are closed. And it's okay. I mean, it's okay to have generation. Everybody knows each other, and you don't want anyone from outside to come in. But it is our job to try to educate. And I know it is not their failure, more our failure, and allowing one source of media to control, like per se, for example, Fox News. You know, whatever they hear from that, it is going to be the truth, because their grandparent watched it. This is something going on a TV all day. Everywhere they go, they see it, hear it. So it becomes part of their reality. I don't know what can we do to go and try to reach those people. And I keep talking to my friends who have families, and I'm sure you have families who are not going to sit and listen and think politics and think about you as someone who is not part of the family. I have friends like that who had their family disown them, basically, for just coming and supporting things that the family doesn't support. But you can't give up. Like, you have to talk, you have to bring up that subject and be the change. I can't go and talk to your family, but you can. You know, and that's for all of you out there listening. Don't give up. Don't look at your grandma or your mom and say, you know what, they're old generation, they're not going to change. Anybody's going to change. You just have to find the right
well, meeting on values, right? Meeting on values and understanding what the best and most well-received forms of communication are going to be, and that's going to be different between, you know, every single person, and debating on who you're with. I have a whole book on communication theory actually on my bookshelf behind me that tells into a lot of all my communication books from college, and just, you know, again, coming back and bringing it back to how do we make things digestible, because there's so much questionable content out there. And I do think it does a huge disservice when, even though we may see I think rightfully so, that some people have definitely voted based on racist tendencies and things like that. There are other people where, if we're looking at 2016, the vote wasn't between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, I don't believe. When I look at it, especially when I look at my generation and the votes that were there and those of Gen X and what were there in particular, you know, our experiences with voting are entirely different. I have so much respect for Nancy Pelosi and for the Hillary Clintons and stuff who had to go in and make amends when they were running in a male-dominated playing field, to be able to walk so that people of our generation and like the AOCs and the Omars and even, you know, like Brittany Rodas, who I absolutely adore here in PA and everything, so we can really pick up and run here. And we've come such a long way together. It's so important to remember that our voices are all important, but we need to make sure we're reaching out and having, you know, these conversations that matter. And as you had mentioned, that starts right here at home. So if anyone ever needs any help with this, you know, cost is always usually the biggest factor when we're talking about these things. If it's not something very specific on a very touchy set of values, it's usually cost. Or, you know, in this case with healthcare, just to draw it back really quick, okay, I understand that healthcare is a huge industry here, and that will show some change, and especially with insurance. For example, we need to make sure that any jobs that might be put aside or left out, that we are providing job training within these new areas of development that we'll be putting up, that we were ensuring that, again, people like my father who lost their entire livelihood in 2008, and then the markets change and things are totally different, making sure that we have continuing education and trade programs and opportunities for people of all ages that are covered, so that as we're making these transitions, these jobs are able to be sustainable and available for those who would otherwise be left out work.
And I think a lot of people afraid, thinking that bringing more people, immigrant refugees, or allowing free healthcare is taken away from what they already have. And we have to assure them and explain it is, you generate revenue, you have people that are working. It is not an amount that is gonna be dry, because every day we are alive, we're gonna work, we're gonna bring more money, and there is enough to go around to cover everyone. We just have to, like you said, cut the middleman, try to stop being greedy, try to explain to people what, you know, get into their level and explain to them without people more, they get more defensive when you come and even if they don't know the subject, and you come and say, you know what, you don't know what you're talking about. And instead of doing that, I think we need to reach out to you, Sarah, and communication and showing people how you can approach someone who is defensive, or someone who is, you think they're hard-headed. Everybody has a button, but we just need to find which way we need to approach them. And another, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was
just gonna go ahead. It's not like with you, everything is like the time is flying. I feel like there's a lot that
you have me as long as you like me. I love
share, and you can educate and raise awareness about so many topics. And you are just an amazing, all-rounded person, and I'm honored to know you and have you on the show today.
That means a lot to me.
Yeah. What were you saying? Sorry.
I was just going to say that, again, with having these conversations, I appreciate you mentioning about reaching out. Feel free. You know, we are working on rolling out an astronomical, really website redo, where we break down the policies and what we're looking. We break down, here's the problem, here's the solutions we propose, and even here are some of the House bills that are out right now that we would support and vote on and push if we were in office right now, or what we would do differently. But in the meantime, while that's coming out, if you're on Facebook, you know, you can look up @Sarah for Us or Google Sarah Hammond for Congress. I promise you both will lead to our Facebook page. I'm tied directly into that, and oftentimes, if it's a specific question, like that either gets forwarded to me or I see that. We have a pretty well organized system. So if you message info@sarahforus.com, you know, that email will either be able to be answered by the political director, our policy team, or it'll be forwarded to me if it's something, again, that's a specific question for me. So we know how crucial it is to make sure that we're having these kinds of conversations. As our postcards say, Your vote, voice, your future. As these are going out, the focus has to be on amplifying the voices of our people, making sure that we are properly allocating. It doesn't mean like raising taxes, or if so, not by much, but properly allocating again from all those band-aids that were on the house, and making sure that we're re-putting that money into building a solid foundation from the bottom up. And as we're having those conversations, Ian, who is kind of like my all-around right-hand man here, especially with helping and coordinating teaching volunteers and our intern teams, how we have these discussions formally at the door, now on the phone, or as we're writing postcards, or as we're doing digital canvassing, which we're looking to wrap out, or even just how you have these one-on-one conversations with your family. We have measures, and we've been teaching people how to do this. So if you are ever looking for help on those resources, do not hesitate to reach out, and we'll do our best to be able to walk you through that so that you can have a more positive experience while doing so.
And please do, for everyone listening to us now or going to listen later on, just look up Sarah, Sarah for Us, I believe, .com, right? That's the website. And I share those websites before the show. I did share them in a separate post. I share them now, and I'm going to share them continuously throughout, like basically every week until November. And I truly hope that you get to know all the candidates and to make an informative decision. This year is particularly important. And why is that, Sarah? Why is this a deal breaker?
So many reasons, but it's so important from a state level, from the federal level, which I'm running for, and also when we're looking strictly at the administration and Donald Trump. Donald Trump, and by proxy, Lloyd Smucker, the congressman I'm running against here in PA 11. Congressman Smucker has voted no on things we've talked about here. So he's voted no on House Resolution 7027, which was the Child Care is Essential Act. He voted no, or nay, rather, on the Child Care for Economic Recovery. He's voted no on Emergency Housing Protections and Relief Act of 2020, which would have helped ensure that people could stay in their homes given everything going on. He's voted against the HEROES Act, which was, the Democrats originally proposed Health and Economic Recovery Plan, and Emergency Solutions Act. He voted against removing the deadline for the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment. He's voted against disaster relief for Puerto Rico and their disasters and the tax relief acts there, which we don't even talk about now that this is going on with COVID, but they're ravished hard. And that's something that, particularly looking in communities like Hanover and the city here in Lancaster, we have a strong Puerto Rican population here who are invaluable to just not just our economy, but our entire cultural diversity and identity and our communities here. And we're not giving them an option to even return home whenever they want to visit family on fair streets, or to be able to say that their hometowns are having electricity or access to clean water. And that's in Puerto Rico, but we're still seeing instances like that in Flint, Michigan, for example. We're seeing them even up in Western Pennsylvania right now with fracking and things that go on that. And, seeing Smucker vote against these things and voting against another one, protecting older workers against discrimination act, these kinds of things are what make voting this year so important, not just for my seat, but in voting in Joe Biden, because Donald Trump, another 4 years of Donald Trump is not going to be pretty for us. And it's going to hurt, particularly, I think, our relations on a national level, our international relations and foreign policy. It's going to directly negatively impact our economies here, everything from the music industry, which is a huge hit. People don't realize that, but especially here in Lancaster, we have some of the top names in the music industry when it comes to production and stuff. Out of Rock Lidditz, we have producers, we have performers. We're on national stage and on the national stage. And then we see healthcare and the issues that we have here and how it's plumbing and how our people at LGH, and my mom works at Hanover Hospital, don't have the proper protective equipment, let alone, any of the funding or the support to be able to take care of them should, they contract COVID or, God forbid, end up on a ventilator or something like that. And we're not taking care of everything in between. And this is so important for us. And with our campaign, as we're looking to try to work with down ballot candidates at the state level, including working with like Rich Sterner and Janet Diaz, who are two state Senate candidates, making sure that we're reaching out to all of our state House candidates. We only have them in Lancaster right now, which makes it a little easier to focus on here, but making sure that we are not just reinventing the wheel, but we are seeing what their needs are, and we are able to fit in within those needs. So we can work with the Lancaster and the York Democratic communities to reach out to their typical Democratic base. But because it's 2020, we don't need to pull teeth to get so many people out to the polls. We can talk to people who have historically been left behind by our party even. We can talk and make sure that we have translated materials that are specifically focused on the issues, and the messaging is specifically focused on the issues in each individual community. Because let's be real, I mean, the issues that we face and the issues that, even that the east and west sides of Lancaster City face are astronomically different, let alone what our Amish counterparts down the street experience and what those in rural areas in Southern York County experience. And when we're looking at how we make the best change, it doesn't just happen at the federal level, it happens by making sure we're supporting and voting in the right people at the state level, so that things like education and zoning laws and things like that can be changed. Because there's a saying in politics you'll hear wherever you go, it's that all politics is local, and it's very true. It's easy to feel that your singular vote doesn't count, but I promise you, your vote is your voice. And nothing showed that more than in 2016 election night, when we saw that nearly 42% of Americans sat out, and that was more than voted, an astronomically amount more than voted for Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton on each side. And it's just so important to get involved and make informed choices, and just understand that you might not like Joe Biden as your first choice. You maybe don't like Donald Trump or are confused about where you are in between. But I seriously implore you to just reach out to your candidates and hear about what sorts of things they actually impact. Because you'll hear a lot of talk, especially from Donald Trump's side of things. But look and see, what has Lloyd Smucker actually done? What has Donald Trump actually voted on? What have your counterparts at the state level actually said and promised you versus what they've actually voted on and delivered or failed to deliver?
Yeah, and shout out to Janet Diaz. She was on our show before, and we strongly support her and all of the Democratic candidates, the strong people who I think, and I'm positive that you all heard about, because I'm going to keep hammering their names and what they believe in your head until November. So you can vote and vote your conscience, vote what is right. And like you said, Sarah, 2016, a lot of people did not vote, either because they did not like either candidates. And you know what? Not voting, it's basically deciding too. Like, if you don't vote this year, you are voting for Donald Trump. Because any vote that we lose for his opponent, Joe Biden, it is a vote for him. Sitting it out is not going to cut it this year. And hearing, empty promises, it is not the way to go. And like Sarah said, go read, learn about what they actually voted on or voted against. And, you might look at it and don't think it's going to affect you, but it will. And if it didn't affect you now, it will affect you in 4 years of Donald Trump. It is not going to cut it. I am so sorry if you don't like Joe Biden. At least he's someone going to play by the rules. Vote for your House representative, vote your Senate, vote for your congressmen and women, and have them be there to stop him, or to make sure your voice is heard. Don't just vote for presidency, vote for all your local offices, because those matter as well. But you have to vote, and you have to know who you're voting for, and what is that going to affect you and affect the whole picture. A lot of people, Sarah, don't look at things until it affects them personally, and I think this is part of our issue. I don't mind. I pay a lot of taxes, and I'm happy paying it, because you know what? I know where it's going. It's going to support my kids. It's going to support somebody else's kids who cannot afford this, and we are all benefiting from this. And there is enough to go around. I mean, just think about others while you're thinking about you, and try to do good just by voting. If that's the only thing that you can do, please do it. And how
Well,
oh, I'm sorry,
oh,
go ahead.
sorry. I was going to say it's important to remember too is just to pull it back to the beginning when we were talking about that concept of really having scapegoats created. There is this concept, and this is, I can only speak for white rural America that I come from, but there's this concept that you're ashamed to be in poverty or impoverished in these areas. And we very much are. We fall right there. We're living paycheck to paycheck, barely, if that. We have, multi-million-dollar condos a couple blocks over from my office where I'm at right now, and right across the street, we have one of the largest homeless populations here. And it's horrible. There's no protections. And you know what? We have county commissioners who have talked about homeless preventative measures that include homeless not sleeping in certain areas or not doing certain things or whatever, rather than addressing the issues. And this is not unique to here. This is pretty universal across the nation. We need to come back and invest in our people. And when we're looking at 2016 and we're looking to now, 2016, as I mentioned, it wasn't so much, Republican versus Democrat. It was more what people were fed up, and this, I strongly stand by my observation that I believe that people voted based on who they felt represented the establishment and who they felt, the establishment has let them down. And Hillary Clinton represented the establishment for them, regardless of how, what her resume was basically to be there.
Yeah.
And when they saw Donald Trump, it's really cringeworthy to see how he got so far. But you said it the exact same way. Republicans and Democrats did not take him as seriously, and people voted for him for a couple of reasons, but it was largely because either they were watching Fox News and did not see the same horrible things that you and I, because they were cut out. And that's not their fault entirely when you don't have the right media literacy. And that's why having these conversations and getting involved is so important. There's a lot of buyer's remorse, a lot of people, even Republicans, who are switching sides now, going into 2020, even here in rural PA, where it's a very predominantly red area in most of our areas here. But values are values, and people are starting to slowly see what's been happening, because you can't escape it anymore. It's not kind of the situation. But as you mentioned, people are afraid of change, and I think rightfully so sometimes, because we haven't always executed it very well in this country. But when it comes down to taxes, I'm happy to pay whatever taxes I need to, because I know that if I'm in a position where I'm struggling to keep up with my taxes, then I should probably fall into a lower tax bracket and have more support for myself there, so that I can make it to a better position within the economy and for myself and for my family. And we should see a progressive tax system where once you are making, as AOC, so eloquently put it, nesting doll yacht club, like rich kind of wealth, where you just are hoarding wealth and you've made it off the back of people who are forced onto government subsidies that then in turn the lower middle class and impoverished classes are paying for anyway. Why aren't we investing or properly allocating these resources into taking care of our people? And why are we not properly taxing the most wealthy people who have made their wealth, such as Jeff Bezos, who has made billions and billions, even just with COVID. And he's done that off the backs of his warehouse workers, some that are even local, who don't have proper protective equipment. They don't have adequate health care. Some of them are on SNAP benefits. Their children are on CHIP here in the state. There's so many issues, and it gets me really fired up, because I was one of those families that was on CHIP assistance when my dad lost his job. I am one of those families that was fortunate enough not to be on food stamps, but to have been very familiar with friends. It's not an uncommon thing to know that, what your social benefits were, and then to start to hear a lot of the people around you go in on people who are Black or brown or are members of the LGBT community or whatever the case may be about welfare, because we've been taught that you don't want to talk about how you're in poverty, and it's easier to blame it on a scapegoat, whether that is someone who is from Puerto Rico or who's come from Mexico and is being exploited, in a labor practice here, just trying to make a decent living. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for a couple generations of immigrants coming in. I wouldn't have the opportunities that I have. And just one more thing to tie in white privilege. And the concept of that is, I think it's so difficult to digest to people in places like Hanover and who are fed this stuff, because their lives are incredibly difficult where we come from. And we don't hear that talked about so much. Instead, we're told that it's other people's faults that we are the way that we are.
Yeah.
And it doesn't come down to, I don't even want to say it's not about accountability of our people, because when you're set up in a situation where you've not been paid attention to, whether it's politically, whether it is economically speaking, whether you have a lot of blight in the streets, or your zoning laws have set up areas where you have schools that are segregated just because of where, you know, generations of wealth have kind of grown into and what resources are available there. It's a lot of fighting against each other, a lot of taking civics out of our classrooms, and it's unfortunate that we have to continue to work to educate and sort of like pull out this giant knot that this has become. But it's so important, and the work that we do now, you know, whether you like Joe Biden or not, I implore you to get involved, because I'm much more progressive, very much so, than Joe Biden. But you know what? We're out here, we're working, and as we our voices known, that gives Joe Biden and his campaign team and other elected officials more of a push to find a middle ground between they and us as we're moving forward.
And at least you can reason in someone who is been in politics, and you know, I don't understand how someone like Donald Trump was elected to begin with, but that's because I know what I know and you know what you know. And a lot of people failed. And I try to understand the other part who just voted because they're tired and feeling there is no change and their voice is not heard and all of that. And you know what? This is the time.
Yeah.
Not just vote, do something about it. You can't just complain without trying to do something. It start with even your local, like we said, in moving all the way to the presidency. You said something, and I know, you know, I can sit here and talk to you for years. I know you're a very
Likewise.
human, but you are a very resourceful and amazing, energetic, and I know you are going to do great when you win. And I'm not going to say, you know, because we know this is going to happen. People are going to vote, and we need Sarah in our life to make a difference and to make the change. And the I know we talked about systemic oppression briefly. This is a huge, deep problem. Criminal justice reform, and I know a lot of people now when they hear this, and Donald Trump based his campaign this year on the fear. This is something. I grew up in Sudan. I lived through dictatorship. And when Donald Trump won, I told everyone, like my friends and everyone around me, you know what? I lived this back when I was young. I know a dictator when I see one. I hear him, I see him. I don't smell him, I'm not close to him, but I see this is happening. And now with him mentioning that he's going to delay, I want to hear your thought about that, delaying the election also. But someone like Donald Trump, a dictator who live and survive on fear, trying to make us not just unite. If we unite, he has no chance. Dividing us is the way for him and any dictatorship to continue ruling, you know? But he is using symbol things that it might be too hard to explain to just a normal person, defunding the police and criminal reformation, reforming. This is when I saw that commercial, I was like, you can't be serious, you know?
See how the photos that he's showing are actually he claims that'll be Joe Biden's America, but that's actual footage from Trump's America.
Yeah, exactly. He's denying. I mean, we know that from day one, everything that he promised. He's a psychopath. He's everything in the book. He's like a mental health.
Extremely narcissistic, I think, and extremely close.
Everything.
He's extremely unrelatable, and I think why he grew so much in support, or at least in people willing to give him a chance, because he was not the usual kind of candidate. I think that there's some sort of conditioning, obviously, in people's minds with The Apprentice and him having copious amounts of wealth and stuff, and not understanding, you know, what his failures were as a businessman, or where his wealth came from, or his small loan of $1 million. I could do crazy things with a small loan of $1 million here in Lancaster City. So, you know, unfair footing to start out, but we just have. It's important to remember. There's so many paths I could go down. I'm thinking of right now, but it's crazy how it all ties in. But I think if I want to keep it straight on why people supported him, other than him being an outside choice, is that they viewed in themselves someone who he represented the American dream to them, or what was sold the American dream. And realistically speaking, having a nuclear family, like 2 kids, a dog, a white picket fence, having one parent who was the sole breadwinner while the other stayed at home, and you could live a nice life off of that. That's of our grandparents' generation.
Yeah.
And I'd love to know what would have been like to grow up, you know, not worried about if I could afford to have a child at any point, or to know that I could pay for student. I mean, I worked 4 jobs simultaneously at any given point during college, and that was just to cover what little bit public student loans, like federal student loans, wouldn't cover. And I'm still almost $40,000 in debt, still consistently paying off.
Better than me.
But from one of the most what was the most affordable public school at the time here in Pennsylvania. And it's just, it's not cutting it. We don't have the proper resource. I think Donald Trump, he was able to say, I see these issues that are happening, just enough to acknowledge them in people, and then he filled them with empty words, got them excited like it was a pep rally, and gave them a reason to believe that it was okay to be how they are. And yes, it's okay to live within your struggle and to promote it, but he exploited it to a degree without people realizing that he wasn't going to do anything for them to get them out of it, basically, if that makes sense. And so to tie that back to his most recent thing with his thing about defunding the police, right? Yeah. So I have a love-hate relationship with this, both as particularly from a branding perspective as someone who's in communications. Yeah. And I will say I'll start out with the positives, because I do think that defund the police, first off, you know, I'm not BIPOC, I'm not Black, Indigenous, I'm not a person of color. I have in no way, shape, or form any voice in leading this movement or critiquing it as such either. From a strictly comms perspective, I understand why defund the police is a scary thing, because we've been taught, particularly white America, has been taught that the police are in your communities to help out when things are bad. And again, in areas like Hanover,
the case for white Americans.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I focus on here from a positive perspective is defund the police. Had it been called anything else, probably would not have gained the traction that it has now. Yeah. Realistically speaking, it's gotten people to talk. It's forced people to relook into it. When I talk about what defunding the police actually means, I do support it. I believe in reinvesting the resources for social programs and social benefits and things to go towards those resources so police can try to get back to do the jobs that they were supposed to do. I think there should be a lot more guidelines, there should be a lot more training. But what I will say is, if we're talking about potentially changing what we call that now, Saf Thorpe is someone who I just have a heck of a lot of respect for here within our Lancaster community. She posted one time about if defund the police does not work when you're having conversations with your family, try talking about funding what works. Yeah. So when we talk about, you know, what does this look like? It's sort of like when we have the talk of reparations. It's difficult to talk about white privilege and what reparations would look like. Particularly in rural white America, where there's not been a lot of exposure and we are very poor, and it's difficult to grasp the concept of, I can't pay to live, but now you want to tax me to pay for someone else. Yeah. On top of that, when I didn't have anything to do with slavery or whatever, there's a lot of, again, like we talked about, this educating on these conversations and talking about how these inequities have transpired over the last 2 or 3 generations, how, these, and how that ties in really to rural families too, because they don't have the greatest end of the stick. Inner city families do not have the greatest end of the stick. And when we look at people like Donald Trump talking about keeping basically white suburban areas clean and away from impoverished communities, essentially, like he's talked about this week. We know what his motives are. We know who he's talking to. We know what class has the money to support him. And they don't see anything outside of what he's telling them or what their closed, unique experiences are. So it's just, I can't express it enough. I know it's just education and having conversations like this. And sometimes, that's obviously a lot more difficult to do this year since we can't be outdoors face to face. We have to do a lot of flip drops. We have to do a lot of postcards. That's why, if you want to volunteer and get involved, you can write postcards to send out to either your neighbors, or we can give you a stack of names of people that are persuadable, people who are not Democrats, who are sat out the last election, really is who we're targeting in large part. And just writing why, you don't even have to write about why my seat's important to you, but why it's so important to you that your neighbors go out to vote and what's at stake. Because at the end of the day, our platform is not so much about myself. We try to make it as little about me as a candidate as possible and really put the focus on amplifying our people's voices. That's why, again, on our postcards, you can see.
Yes, please put that up so we can see it.
Yeah, so I have 5 different.
Yeah, let me lower my picture so people can see the full screen.
So this one is for the youth climate strike. We have photos of people protesting in Washington with some glare. We have people who are protesting, and actually I have a sign up here, Lancaster County pipelines for our cleaner environments. We have people fighting for student and worker rights. And we have people fighting for just social and economic justice in general. And if you look us up, you'll see in everything we do, we try to make it so that it's about the unique voices of our area, because at the end of the day, I believe, and I'm running because I believe that we should have every representative who's in office should not be running off the backs of corporations. They should not be running off the backs of their parties alone just because someone was handpicked, or we have this concept of what electability is or should be. And making sure that as we send people, into office, that they are doing their duty to be the best representation and reflection to the whole of their abilities, and not just for partisan gain of their communities. Because the only way that we're going to move forward together and make sure that we can create an equitable future, whether you're Black, brown, Indigenous, white, or anything in between, regardless of socioeconomic status, wherever else you're at, we need to make sure that we have the right people at the table who are able to, in turn, talk to the right people when you're talking about policy. Because, I don't know everything. I'm not Black. I cannot speak on behalf of Black Lives Matter, but I can be here and continue to be here to support initiatives like Safe House Lancaster and like the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm not an immigrant or a refugee, but I can be here to ensure that we're making sure that whether you're an undocumented immigrant and don't have access to healthcare right now, that you have that available for you, making sure that we have better pathway to citizenships here, because I understand and my team understand how critical it is to our district. We are the most unique district, I think, in the entire United States. We have the Amish, we have refugees and immigrants, we have people from Philly and the Bronx and from Baltimore. We have, to the left of us, we're one of the strongest agricultural areas, and unfortunately the most negatively impacted by things like the climate crisis, as we're looking on what jobs are going to be sustainable for generations to come. We are so unique in our attributes, and we just have to start coming together and respecting each other. And the more that we can get in the streets and do this together, or virtually in obviously 2020, the way we are right now, the work that we put in now doesn't just have to do with this election cycle. It has to do with looking forward to 2022. Yeah. It has to look forward to, making sure we're getting rid of gerrymandering so our voices are heard properly at the state and federal level. It has to do with making sure that our kids' generation have a better opportunity at an equitable future than we do. And that has to do with making sure that, as difficult as it is, we are being as selfless and as empathetic as we can, because we have to plant the seeds of the trees that'll give shade to future generations to come, even if that means that we might not get to bear the fruit all the fruits of that in my lifetime.
You are absolutely amazing. And for everyone listening out there, I don't know about you, but I want Sarah not to just be my representative, but I want her to be my president because I know, you deeply care about issues that affect all of us. And you care about the community. You care about making this place and this earth a better place for all of us, regardless of our color, ethnicity, social orientation, sexual orientation. I mean, there is not enough time in the world to sit down and talk with you. And I know our time is running out. You are a busy woman. You have to get back to your campaign. But I want you to tell everyone how can we help you? I know you mentioned that. Just summarize all that again. What can we do? And where can we go to help you? Either online or if you have a place that they can come up, pick up signs, anything
Yeah.
we can do.
So right now, as I showed you, we have tons. This is only 250 of like the 2,500 postcards we currently have. Well, some of them are already out, but you can pick up postcards. You can we can either provide you with postage to send them out, or if you want to make just sort of your own in kind donation of a couple bucks to go towards your postage, you can just write letters to either your friends who need to vote, or we can send a list. We have instructions that go with what postcarding is. You can stay in touch if you're on social media. We are on Twitter and Instagram, but Facebook is our most active right now, just with our resources and knowing where our audience is. In large part, we're also looking to launch into just working again with down ballot candidates to drop information at doors. That way people have that, but we don't have to interact face to face with people, so it's a safer environment. In the next week and a half here, we'll have yard signs in at our office, which is 118 North Prince Street in downtown. I can make sure that I forward that information to you once we're in here.
Okay, and I'll post that.
Yeah, and we just having conversations. So anyone that's in our district, or even if you're outside of our district, you can still help out here, or you can take these tactics back to help in your respective communities. But texting, join with us, join our volunteer team, shoot us an email. The best place to do it is to just go online and sign up as a volunteer, and we can get you situated with anything that you want to do, whether it's postcarding, lip dropping, hosting a virtual house party to help us, take 30 minutes out of the day so I can talk to some of your friends and maybe try to get some donations from them to help fuel our campaign. We're entirely grassroots funded, no special interest money, no outside help from that regard, just small dollar donations. So donating is another big way, or helping us propagate donations is another good way to help make sure we can send out more postcards, more yard signs, more digital advertisements, and just sharing, inviting people to our page, and speaking up for what you think is right. If you like what we're talking about, make a post and tag us in it so we can reshare it on our page. Our thing is about making sure that any criticism that's out there, if we have not covered a topic that is important to you and you think is important to the district, just reach out and I'll make sure we add it into our website or our social media and our platform. We're trying to be as extensive and as inclusive as it is, and to do that, we need to continue to have these conversations and to be accessible. And I have a friend from college who once told me, every day's a school day, Sarah. And I strongly believe that we need to continue learning until we're no longer in, because the moment that your elected officials become complacent, they're no longer doing the best of their abilities within their means to do their job to support you. So just stay in touch, reach out, and whether you are more extroverted or more introverted, whether you prefer phone calls or like less contact with postcards, we have plenty of opportunities for you to get involved and to support us in whichever ways and times you have.
And again, you are an amazing, amazing person. And I know for sure that no one will sit down and listen to you and not feel that they are going to support you 100%. I know you have my support all the way. I will do whatever I can to get your vote out and to get people to vote. And I hope all of you listening to us now will do the same. And we're not trying to pursue you or persuade you from learning about any other candidate, but we're just trying to give you the opportunity to get to know Sarah and to know what she's passionate about and what can you do to help. If you don't know what to do, reach out and I will post everything. I will post the website, the Facebook page, and the address as well. The big thing that I think now is more important than any other time is donating, because and those candidates use their own money to run this campaign, especially with the pandemic. They can't go out physically, so they have to send postcard and do a lot of things that are costly. So there is in our website, there is a contribution button, donate. I'm going to share that later also. Please do your part. Learn, donate, volunteer, educate, raise awareness, do anything. As we said at the beginning, be the change that you want to see in this world. And thank you again, Sarah, for giving us the time and coming and talking and continue fighting for us. And I truly appreciate the time. Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone watching. And please do share and contact Sarah. Have a good night.